Imagine you are standing near a rocky shelter about 13,000 years ago. The sun is gone. The fire is low. The air smells like smoke, sweat, crushed plants, and something strange bubbling in a stone hollow near the edge of camp. You are hungry, but not starving. That is important because starving people make brave decisions, and brave decisions in prehistory were often just mistakes with confidence. Someone has left a wet mash of grain, fruit, and water sitting too long. It was supposed to be food. Maybe it was supposed to be part of a feast. Maybe nobody planned anything. But now it smells sour. Not rotten exactly, not fresh either. One person tastes it. Everyone watches. At first, nothing happens. Then the person smiles for no clear reason. His face goes warm. He talks louder. He tries to stand and almost loses a fight with the ground. And now the group has a serious question. Is this poison? Or did food just invent a very confusing feeling? There is no doctor, no chemistry, no written recipe, no warning label saying, may cause terrible decisions near cliffs. So how did ancient humans survive this strange discovery? And when did they realize that spoiled fruit, honey, grain, or juice could become something more than food? That is the real story of ancient alcohol. Not a party at first, not a tavern, not a cold beer after work. The first human experiences with alcohol were probably messy, accidental, risky, and very weird. A fruit falls, a honeycomb gets wet, a pot of grain sits too long. Tiny invisible organisms start eating sugar, and the food changes. Today, we call that fermentation. To ancient humans, it may have looked like nature was doing something suspicious behind their backs. By the end of this, you will see alcohol less like a modern drink and more like a survival puzzle. It was chemistry before chemistry, food storage before refrigerators, social glue before written laws, a ritual tool before temples. And sometimes, yes, it was probably one ancient person staring at another ancient person and thinking, why is he walking sideways? But to understand when humans started drinking alcohol, we have to begin with a problem that sounds boring and was actually terrifying. Food does not want to stay food. In the Stone Age, everything valuable was temporary. Meat spoiled, fruit bruised, honey attracted insects, bears, and every small creature with an opinion. Seeds got wet, tubers molded, water could make you sick. Even the good smell of food could call in animals that were stronger than you and much less interested in sharing. Modern people open a fridge and complain that the milk expires on Tuesday. Ancient people had to look at a pile of soft fruit and decide, with their actual intestines, whether Tuesday had already happened. This is where the alcohol story probably begins. Fermentation happens when yeasts and other microbes feed on sugars. They produce alcohol and other compounds as a result. But no ancient person could see yeast. Nobody looked into a bubbling clay cup and said, ah, yes, our microscopic friends are converting carbohydrates again. They saw bubbles. They smelled sourness. They tasted sweetness changing into sharpness. They noticed that some foods became dangerous, but some became strangely useful. And here is the detail that changes everything. Humans were not the only animals finding fermented food. Many animals will eat very ripe fruit when it starts to ferment. A fallen fruit can become a tiny natural alcohol experiment. If you are a prehistoric human watching birds, monkeys, pigs, insects, or other animals swarm certain fruits, you might learn something. Not a recipe, not science, but a clue. These fruits are not automatically death. Of course, not automatically death is not the same as good idea. That is basically the official motto of prehistory. Physically, humans were not built like perfect survival machines. No claws, no fangs, no thick armor, no built-in night vision worthy of a cat. We could not smell danger like a wolf. We could not outrun many animals. We could not eat rotten meat like a vulture and then casually continue our day. A prehistoric human was basically a nervous, upright ape with a rock, a stick, and a suspicious amount of curiosity. But that curiosity mattered. The first layer of the answer is observation. Ancient humans survived by noticing patterns. This fruit made us sick. That fruit made us sleepy. This smell means death. That smell means maybe safe if you only take a little. That animal ate it and did not fall over. This batch bubbled for 2 days and tasted sharp. The other batch grew green fuzz, and everyone agrees we should throw it far away and insult it from a distance. This was not one genius inventing alcohol in a dramatic movie scene. It was probably thousands of small experiments spread across thousands of years. Some accidental, some repeated, some forgotten, some taught. Now, keep this in mind because it matters later. Fermentation is not rare. It does not need a laboratory. It needs sugar, moisture, time, and the right microbes. Those conditions appear again and again in different places. A tree hollow with rainwater and fruit, a skin bag carrying honey and berries, a wooden bowl with crushed plants, a stone mortar holding soaked grain, later a clay pot. Each one is basically a prehistoric science project, except nobody signed the safety form. At first, ancient humans may have discovered natural alcohol from fruit or honey without making it on purpose. Imagine finding overripe berries that taste sharp and sweet. Imagine honey diluted by rainwater, left warm near camp, slowly changing. Imagine palm sap or tree sap fermenting after collection. These things can happen without agriculture, without pottery, and without a person deciding, tonight we become brewers. But here is where it gets strange. The moment humans started storing food, they changed the game. Storage is one of the most underrated technologies in human history. A container is not just a container. It is a pause button. It says, I do not need to eat this right now. That sounds simple until you remember that every insect, mold, microbe, mouse, and hungry neighbor in the landscape would also like to press play. When people stored sweet liquids, fruit pulp, grains, or plant mash, fermentation became more likely. A sealed pouch, a covered pit, a jar, or a stone hollow could protect food from animals, but it could also trap moisture and warmth. It could turn a normal meal into a bubbling surprise. This is why alcohol may have been discovered many times. Not because ancient people were all secretly looking for nightlife, because everyone had the same problem. Food changes. And humans were the animal that kept asking, can we use that? Now, ancient alcohol was not like modern alcohol. This is the part most people picture wrong. The first fermented drinks were probably not clear golden beer in a frosty glass. There were no refrigerators, no metal kegs, no perfect yeast control, no clean bottle with a mountain logo trying to convince you that drinking it makes you outdoorsy. Early fermented drinks could be cloudy, thick, sour, weak, smoky, grainy, and full of floating bits that made the whole thing look like soup with a secret. Some may have been closer to a thin porridge than a modern drink. Some may have had very low alcohol. Some may have gone bad quickly. Some were probably consumed fresh, before they became truly disgusting or dangerous. Which means the first bar in human history may have looked less like a party and more like 6 dirty people cautiously sipping suspicious oatmeal. But that does not make it unimportant. In fact, it makes it more important. Because if a group learned that one kind of fermentation made food safer, tastier, more filling, or more socially powerful, that knowledge was worth remembering. And memory was the real technology. Not written memory yet. Living memory. Grandmother memory. Story memory. Do not touch that pot memory. Wait until it bubbles like this memory. Use that plant, not this plant memory. The kind of memory carried in gestures, warnings, songs, jokes, and the face an older person makes when a younger person is about to do something extremely stupid. Language turned dangerous experiments into group knowledge. A lone human might drink the wrong thing and die quietly. A group could watch, remember, argue, warn, and improve the next attempt. That sounds dark, because it is. Trial and error in prehistory was not a cute learning method. It was a system where the error sometimes got buried. But humans had one unfair advantage. They could make yesterday useful. If someone got sick after drinking a certain rotten mixture, the group could remember the smell, the color, the season, the container, the plant, the place. If someone drank a different mixture and only became loud, warm, and strangely friendly, the group could remember that too. This is how a risky accident becomes a repeated behavior. First, it happens. Then someone notices. Then someone tries it again on purpose. Then someone teaches it. Then, one day, it is not an accident anymore. Here's a thing that actually happened. At Jiahu, a Neolithic village in the Yellow River Valley of China, archaeologists found chemical traces in ancient pottery that point to a mixed fermented beverage made from rice, honey, and fruit, such as hawthorn or grape. The date is roughly 7,000 to 6,600 BCE. That is not a drunk caveman cartoon. That is chemistry preserved in pottery. And the ingredients matter: rice, honey, fruit. This was not modern beer. It was a mixed drink created from whatever the environment and culture made available. It suggests people were not just stumbling into fermentation, they were learning to combine things. Now, go even earlier, and the evidence becomes more fascinating but also more careful. At Rockfet Cave in what is now Israel, researchers studied stone mortars linked to Natufian people, a semi-sedentary foraging culture. Some evidence points to a cereal-based, beer-like fermented product around 13,000 years ago, possibly connected to ritual feasting and burial activity. That is huge, but we have to be honest. The older the evidence gets, the harder it is to prove. A stone mortar can hold clues, but those clues can sometimes fit more than one story. Was it beer? Was it porridge? Was it fermented food? Was it part drink, part meal, part ritual substance? The answer may be yes, in a way that does not fit our modern categories. Ancient people did not necessarily separate drink, food, medicine, and ritual the way we do. A fermented grain mixture could be nourishment, celebration, offering, and social event all at once. And this is where alcohol becomes bigger than alcohol. Because drinking together is never just about liquid. It is about trust. Think about it. In a dangerous world, willingly consuming a strange shared substance is a social act. You watch others drink. They watch you. You laugh. You relax. You become slightly less guarded. You share food. You mark a special moment. For a small group of ancient humans, that could matter. Most days were not festivals. Most days were work, hunger, injury, weather, insects, smoke, carrying things, making tools, watching children, avoiding predators, and trying not to die because someone stepped on the wrong snake. A shared fermented drink could turn a normal gathering into a memorable one. It could help mark a funeral, a seasonal feast, a successful harvest of wild grain, a marriage-like alliance, a coming-of-age moment, or a peace agreement between groups that did not fully trust each other. It may have helped people feel that something special was happening, and humans love making special things more special. We add fire, we add songs, we add body paint, we add rules, we add containers, we add the older person who says, no, you are doing it wrong, even if nobody asked. But the real weapon was not the alcohol. The real weapon was repeated behavior. If people gathered at the same cave, used the same mortars, prepared the same plants, and shared the same strange drink around important events, then the drink became part of culture. Not just calories, not just intoxication, a symbol. This is one reason some researchers have wondered whether the desire for fermented grain drinks may have played a role in early cereal use and even early agriculture. That does not mean humans invented farming only because they wanted beer. History is usually not that simple, and ancient humans were not just tiny bartenders with stone tools. But fermented grain could make grain more exciting. Wild cereals are hard work. You gather them, carry them, grind them, soak them, cook them, try not to lose half of them to birds. Compared with grabbing fruit from a branch, grain can feel like a full-time job invented by an enemy. But if grain could become bread, porridge, stored food, ritual food, and a special fermented drink, then suddenly it was more than grass seeds. It was power you could plan around. Here comes the uncomfortable turn. Alcohol may have helped people bond, but it also created new risks. A drunk person near a fire is not an evolutionary masterpiece. A drunk person near a cliff is a short story. A drunk person in a tense group can become a problem with elbows. Even low-alcohol fermented drinks could change behavior. They could reduce caution. They could create arguments. They could waste food if a batch failed. They could become tied to status, ritual control, or social pressure. Once a substance becomes special, someone may decide who gets it, when it is made, and what it means. So alcohol was not just fun, it was dangerous culture. It took something natural, fermentation, and pulled it into human society, where every tool becomes more complicated. Fire cooks food and burns shelters. Spears bring meat and start fights. Language teaches children and spreads rumors. Alcohol can bond a group and also make the group harder to manage. That is the very human pattern. We find a strange force in nature, and then we invite it into camp. Now, when did ancient humans start drinking alcohol? The honest answer is probably much earlier than the first clear archaeological proof, but we cannot name the exact day. Natural fermented fruit could have been consumed by human ancestors long before farming. Early Homo sapiens, Neanderthals, and other human relatives may have encountered fermented foods whenever ripe fruits, honey, or plant juices sat long enough in warm conditions. But finding a drunk feeling is not the same as producing alcohol on purpose. The stronger evidence for deliberate fermented beverages appears much later, with sites like Jiahu around 9,000 years ago, and possible older evidence like Rockafet Cave around 13,000 years ago. So the best answer is layered. Humans probably encountered natural alcohol very deep in prehistory. They likely learned to recognize and use fermentation many times in different environments. And by the end of the Ice Age and into the early farming world, some communities were clearly turning fermentation into a planned technology, a social event, and possibly a ritual practice. This is why we will probably never find the first drunk human. There was no single inventor. No ancient person holding up a bubbling cup while everyone applauded, and a stone tablet appeared saying, "Congratulations, you discovered bad decisions." Instead, there were countless small moments. Someone tasted fallen fruit. Someone noticed honey had changed. Someone left grain wet too long. Someone copied an older person. Someone made a batch for a gathering. Someone used it near a grave. Someone remembered the method. Someone improved it. Someone warned a teenager not to drink too much, and that teenager became part of a tradition that continues with shocking consistency. The funny thing is, alcohol begins as decay. It is food breaking down. But humans are the animal that can look at breakdown and ask, can this become useful? Rot becomes flavor. Spoilage becomes storage. A mistake becomes ritual. A risky sip becomes a social bond. That is ancient human intelligence in one strange cup. They were not stronger than the animals around them. They were not safer. They were not cleaner, they were not magically wise, they were vulnerable bodies in a brutal world, trying things, remembering things, and turning accidents into culture. So when you imagine the first ancient human drinking alcohol, do not picture a wild party. Picture a small group around a fire, a suspicious bowl, a nervous silence, one brave, foolish, or unlucky person taking a sip, then a pause, then laughter, then someone making a mental note. This one did not kill us. And somewhere between that first risk and the first ritual feast, alcohol stopped being just a strange effect of spoiled food. It became human. So the next time someone says, "I only had one drink," remember, that sentence may be older in spirit than cities, writing, and possibly farming. And somewhere, 13,000 years ago, an ancient stickman is still trying to explain to his friends why the cave wall is moving.